Today we're going to start talking about scripting in Grasshopper, and we're going to think about scripting as a way to extend the functionality of what Grasshopper comes with by default. So working with Grasshopper, there's a series of built-in functionality in these nodes. You can also extend Grasshopper through libraries, and a lot of these libraries are actually written by third parties to work within Grasshopper. In addition to using libraries, you can actually extend the functionality to perform tasks that are specific to your needs just by writing very simple scripts or programs that run within the workflow. And as a tool, this is really powerful because you can really start to tailor this interface, this tool, to your specific needs. So you can really kind of use Grasshopper not as a given tool, but as a tool that you can create yourself. So we're gonna go through a few short demonstrations of scripting within Grasshopper by creating this example, which ultimately results in this kind of animation. So in this case, everything you see is done through scripting, just through a series of custom scripts. So you can see here there's form being generated, it's also automatically being rendered and textured, and even the camera itself is being controlled through a script. So in this exercise, we're going to have a series of nodes that we're going to script ourselves. We're going to have one node to generate the actual geometry. We're going to have another node to control the camera. So as we step through the frames, you can see that we're generating more form, and also we have control over the camera. And then another series of nodes which takes care of baking geometry, which is a feature that you can't do with standard Grasshopper. Then we have a node to issue commands to Rhino to render the frame. And then we have an additional node to actually delete the baked geometry from the Rhino file. So once we activate this, we basically have an automatic series of operations that bakes the geometry, renders it out in V-Ray, and then automatically deletes the geometry once that's done. So in this case, you can start to see how scripting can be used to accomplish a task that doesn't come included with basic Grasshopper, such as baking, animating, controlling cameras, things like that. So as a base, Grasshopper supports two scripting languages, C# and VB Script. But in this example, I'm going to actually use Python for scripting, and that's because Python has really gained a lot of popularity in recent years, mostly because of its ease of use and its extendability. So as a designer, if you're going to learn one scripting language, it should really be Python, because once you learn it, you can use it on a lot of different software, not only Rhino, but Maya and other applications. Starting with Rhino 5, Python is actually included within the Rhino interface, but by default, it's not included within Grasshopper. But to use it, we just have to download and install an additional library, and then you get this Python script here. So to install that library, you can just go to Food for Rhino, and under most downloaded, you'll see Python here. So once you download that file, you put it into your components folder, and then you'll get Python here in math under the script node. So I'm just going to start a new file in Rhino, and we're going to start off by creating one of these Python nodes. So go to Scripts, click the Python node, and drag it out. You can see that the Python node looks very similar like any node in Grasshopper. It has a series of inputs and a series of outputs. The difference is that everything within this node is going to be programmable by us. So by default, the node doesn't do anything, and if you hover over the warning, it says no script execute. So like many nodes in Grasshopper, you actually have control over the amount and the names of the inputs that you include. So here it starts with XY. We can add new nodes. We can also rename these to anything we wish. And this becomes really important with scripting because we're actually going to use the names of the inputs and outputs in writing our script. So this is what we're going to reference as the inputs into our function, and we're going to output geometry or data or information into the outputs. So you should pay attention to what you're naming these things. Okay, so to start off with, we can double click on the node, and this gives us access to Rhino's Python interface. And this is a really standard kind of scripting programming interface where you have a text window here where you can type in commands, and you have an output window here which displays information and outputs from your script. Scripting in general It's kind of a procedural workflow, very similar to Grasshopper. The only difference is that instead of working with graphical nodes and wires to pass information, everything is done through text. So at first this can be sort of intimidating to get started because you kind of have to know the right syntax and the right commands to use. But once you get the hang of this, you can quickly see the power in it and the flexibility of the things you can do by issuing commands directly to Grasshopper. So the way this works is basically you type in commands. So here we can say print. It's a Python command, and it outputs a piece of information to the output window. We type in hello world, and we can hit execute, and it'll output that piece of information here. By default, what is output to this window through print statements is also output to this output here. So you can use this to quickly pass information out of your Python node. So just like with any scripting or programming, the commands you type will be executed in a row. So if we print hello world and then we have another statement, hello again, you can see those get executed one after another. Okay, and this is going to be the basis for how we're going to think about scripts. It's very similar to Grasshopper in that when you start to link data together and link operations, everything gets executed in a certain sequence. The difference here is that it's not as graphically intuitive, but it's a lot more open and flexible. And the other advantage of scripting is that you actually have more control over the order and sequence of the operations. Programming comes with a set of procedures for actually controlling what lines of the code get executed, so you can do things like skip over lines, you can execute specific lines at specific times based on certain conditions, and you can also loop over the same function multiple times, which are all things that are possible but more difficult to do with Grasshopper.